Mike McCarthy, Shipston Area Flood Action Group, founder member for the last 10 years. Over recent years, Shipston has seen some progress in reducing the risk of fluvial flooding to more than 70 homes and businesses, due largely to the combined efforts of SAFAG, Shipston Area Flood Action Group, the EA and Severn Rivers Trust. The funding for this work came from a variety of sources, but mainly the EA and Stratford District Council. The Town Council at Shipston has now absorbed the activities of SAFAG into a formal flood and environmental working group and is looking to establish a new programme of initiatives for the essential measures that can further reduce the ongoing risk of flooding to the town and surrounding areas. Suzanne Ward, who's the place manager of the EA, senior manager, has indicated that we should be looking to WCC as our lead local flood authority, LLFA, to lead the flood alleviation strategy for the town. But we continue to work closely with the EA in identifying opportunities. However, WCC have indicated that Shipston may not feature as a high priority in their emerging county-wide strategy for flood management. And in any event, the Stour is Shipston's main river and therefore EA responsibility. This despite the fact that natural flood management, 860 of them, have benefited Shipston and downstream communities will have to be built on ordinary watercourses upstream of Shipston. So the questions I can ask, please. Can the EA confirm that they will continue to work with Shipston Town Council to leverage our landowner relationships and identify opportunities for further natural-based solutions that can help reduce flood risk to the town? Question 2 is, what role can the WCC play in helping Shipston to reduce the risk of fluvial flooding in the town and our neighbouring communities? This could be in the form of direct funding, opportunity identification, project management, and sponsoring of third-party funding opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We have another question, so I'll read from the Shipston Town Council, so I'll read that out before the agencies are asked to respond. This question is from John Dinney, who's the mayor of Shipston at the moment and obviously a town councillor, and he's also a member of the SAFAG group. The question is, well, there's an introduction to it. In addition to the fluvial flooding risk, we have to be aware of the recent occurrences of pluvial flooding, flash flooding, I think that means, and the occasions when both forms of flooding combine. Increased intensity and duration of rainfall due to climate change exacerbate both of these. Retaining rainwater where it falls and slowing the flow higher up the catchment using natural flood management measures reduces the combined effects. We have instances where the built environment on newly designed housing developments has failed to appreciate the extent and seriousness of surface water runoff, combined with ineffective or faulty drainage. It would be good for STC Planning Department to encourage Severn Trent to be more rigorous in placing demands on developers to address this both in design and execution of drainage strategies. Right, and we have two more sub-questions from John Dinney. We also have repeated instances of foul water flooding in the town and in river pollution due to sewage discharges from locations further upstream. Questions could be put to Severn Trent about ensuring that their assessment of planning applications and their own system capacity planning are sufficiently joined up to prepare the system in advance rather than wait for failure to prompt action. Warwickshire County Council highways also have a role to play in the flooding management jigsaw. they have a routine for systematically clearing highways drains. However, this does not appear, this does appear to miss drains out, and whenever flooding occurs on uncleared highway drains can often be found under it. Could we have some improvement that does not rely on the local residents as their inspectors? Right, so those are the questions. Would you like to ask a question first?
Yes, it might be useful to do it at this stage.
Councillor Junid.
I'm Susan Juned. I'm the District Councillor for Ulster. We've had a long history of flooding in Ulster. The first flood defences were actually built in the 1960s following major flood events. Further flooding occurred in Ulster since 1998. We had 2 near misses in 2011 and 2012, and we had another near miss this last winter in 2023. Some flood defence work was done post the 1998 in 2001. I got that because I became an advisory member of the Environment Agency based down at Tewkesbury and was able to work with them on that. But the defences on the other side, because we've got 2 rivers, we've got the Arrow and then we've got the Olne. And the flood defences on the Olne side have only seen some improvements, but mostly repairs, not major improvements. And that was proved to be a real problem this last winter when we came very, very close to being overtopped. So my questions are, and also drainage is a real problem in the town. Some of the events like the 2011 and 2012 were mainly drainage problems and not being able to get the water out or drainage in. And then Colton, which I also represent, has got major drainage problems, and as has Great Orme. This last winter, for example, students were not able to get to the school on 6 occasions because of the problems with drainage on the road. So you had a meeting, you had a public workshop with the public in Ulster in 2019 when you said you were doing ground investigations over the summer of 2019 and that we further work, and then there was a workshop later on about natural flood management. But we've had no real updates since then. Could you please provide us with some updates as to the work that has been done since 2019 to look at drainage and the flood defences in the town, and who else needs to be involved to be able to get real action so that we do not get a further response, a deterioration in this next winter. Just to top it off, my question is that the University of Bristol has recently done research which just shows that the impact of climate change is likely to get worse with more intense flood, more intense weather events. I do not want to have to go through another winter with flooding threatened to Ulster. So could you please update us on all the work that has been done by Severn Trent, by the Environment Agency and by Warwickshire County Council to make sure that Ulster and its environs are kept safe? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Junid. Right, I understand that the agencies have presentations to make as well, which Howard is ready to show on the screens. So would Andrew Richardson from the EA like to start? Oh, sorry, start with County Council, so Jaggett Mayhell then.
Morning all, I'm Jaggett, leader of the flood risk management team at the County Council. Yeah, that's all the first slide says. So, as has already been mentioned, we are the lead local flood authority for Warwickshire County Council. So we lead on the local sources of flood risk, that is surface water, ordinary water courses and groundwater flooding. Do you want to just go on to the next slide, please, Howard? So much of our time is taken working on statutory duties and statutory functions. So the big one of them is we are a statutory consultee for the surface water drainage aspects of major development. About 25 to 35% of our planning applications or consultations come from Stratford District. So in a given year, that can be about 250 consultations, just to kind of give an idea on how many we get. Regulation on ordinary water courses, That includes both regulating new works to watercourses and also doing enforcement actions as and when required. We investigate locally significant flooding. There'll be a definition of that on the next slide. And we maintain a register of local flood risk assets. All in all, when we're a fully staffed team, that probably takes about 75% of our time. On top of that, we have a capital programme of schemes. We've currently got 7 PFR schemes ongoing, and we've also got other scheme development ongoing. We also manage a number of queries and do smaller investigations. We'll go on to the next slide, please, Howard. So, with a limited amount of resources and a large amount of statutory functions that we need to fill with that, we need to prioritise our resources. So the box on the right, which you won't be able to read, but I'm happy to share the slides at the end, outlines how our priorities are, how we prioritise our flooding investigations. That was adopted as part of our local flood risk management strategy. In short, it's areas where flooding poses a risk to public safety, or areas where it enters the habitable areas of residential properties or into commercial. Everything else, we will normally kind of give an advice basis response on that rather than doing a full investigation, but we do encourage people to report their flooding. So the screenshot on the left is our flood reporting tool on the website. The better the picture we've got of what the flooding extents or the consequences of the flooding are in a given area, it allows us to prioritise better. You want to go on to the next slide, please, Howard. So what we try to do, and we try to encourage residents and communities to do, is understand their own flood risk, and we kind of help them kind of take appropriate actions ahead of time. So on the left-hand side of the screen there is the gov.uk website, which has got the EA managed surface water flood maps, and I think that's the flood map for planning up there as well. So it's the risk from rivers and seas. So you can type in a postcode, you can go in and you can have an indication of what the flood risk is like in your area. So what we encourage people to do is to understand their flood risk. There are areas that are going to be at flood risk, they have been at flood risk, and with the increase of climate change, they're going to be at flood risk going forward. So it's not going to be possible to remove every property from flood risk. So we need to take action ahead of time. So do you want to go on to the next slide, Howard? We have a number of different resources on our website to kind of give some advice, point people into directions of where they can kind of take action. So the 3 slides along the right are short 10-minute videos which kind of summarise in an accessible way what is flood risk, understanding your own flood risk and what to do in an event. The flooding in Warwickshire is a slightly bigger document that gives that advice in a bit more detail. And then riparian ownership and responsibilities is a common question, and a common request we have is maintaining ordinary watercourses, what they can do, what are other people's responsibilities. And just go on to the next slide, please. And yeah, this is just an example of some of the flooding that we had over the winter. We've had a historically wet autumn, followed by a historically wet winter, which gave us a record number of named storms across the winter, and we were seeing large areas, completely saturated ground, watercourses at very high levels. So even relatively minor rainfall events would lead to flooding because the catchment was just so saturated, and areas that we hadn't historically seen flood. So Storm Henk was the 2nd of January this year. Can't see it too well on this screen, but on the left-hand side, the blue dots are areas where we suffered internal property flooding or commercial business flooding. We had somewhere in the region of 125 internal properties or businesses flood in January. And then the diagram on the right gives a bit more of the kind of the extent across the county. So they include road closures, reports of highway flooding, and it's got some numbers on the breakdown there. So when you get the slides, feel free, have a look. Next slide, please, Howard. And then that's just the list of the best ways to contact the team. We've got several group mailboxes set up. In reality, the top 2 are going to be the most useful ones. So flooding at warwickshire.gov.uk is for general flood investigations and queries, and then FRM planning at warwickshire.gov.uk .uk is related to our planning function. And that's me.
Right. Thanks, Jag. The Environment Agency. Oh, shall we take all the? Yeah, right. So questions to Jag then from the councillors. So, Councillor Keithley, please.
Thanks very much, Jag. That was interesting. What I took from that is there's a lot of reactive stuff going on about managing floods and where I live and am I going to get flooding and stuff like that. You can go on that site. The public speaker mentioned an emerging county-wide strategy for flood management, which would be a more proactive, forward-looking matter. Can you just explain to us where you are with that and what consultation process is going on so that we can understand the proactive measures that will arise from that piece of strategic work?
So, yeah, you're spot on there. Generally, our work is reactive. Our proactive work is getting ahead of new development and ensuring the new development doesn't exacerbate existing issues. So we've got the developers have to provide evidence that they're not increasing flood risk to the site or elsewhere. But other than that, majority of our work, you're right, is reactive. The risk ranking that Mike referred to is back in 2016, we did a bit of work that took all of our flood reports that we had. It took the flood mapping that you've seen, and it ranked every square kilometre of the county council area from 1 to something like 2,400. We have an ongoing bit of work, which every time I speak to Mike, I say we're nearing the end. We're a little bit closer to the end than the last time I spoke to Mike, which has basically incorporated I can give you a figure, the 1,714 reports that we've had since the last risk ranking. So we were almost there at January sort of time, but then with all the flooding we had over the winter, we had to go back and incorporate all of them. So yeah, that work's ongoing. We expect it done towards the end of the summer. And then once that's done, that will feed into a local flood risk management strategy, which updates our previous one, which is available on the website.
Right, okay, so you're updating an existing strategic document with the latest flood information. That's basically what you're saying.
Currently, yes.
And when you come forward with that strategic piece of work, or that strategy, presumably it identifies where you will prioritise your efforts to reduce the risks to properties. One of the biggest issues we have in the district is a cumulative impact of development on development on development on development. So are you going to consult on this sort of strategic piece of work before you publish it, or is it just an internal piece of work?
Yes, we will. There's a statutory requirement for us to consult on the strategy, and the process in all is about a year and a half. So the current one that's still live on our website went through a full consultation process.
Okay, and residents would be expecting us to ask when are we likely to see that process of consultation so that we can have some input into your document?
I would say it's summer next year is probably the earliest time we'll see it.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Jack. That's good.
I'm reminded that normally the public question is allowed a supplementary question after a speech. So before going on to councillors, I'd ask Mike McCarthy if he's got a supplementary question to the county council.
Sorry. Thank you. The 4 questions I asked you, unfortunately, you haven't answered. What direct funding will we be getting? Opportunity identification, project management, and sponsoring of third-party funding opportunities from WCC, please.
So in terms of Shipston, I think we've done a significant amount and worked alongside the county for a number of years now. Not the county, sorry, the flood group for a number of years now. We are now in a position where we have to look, well, we've been investigating the more recent flooding. We had, as I said, 130 or so properties that flooded over the winter. We have to move our resources and put them into the areas that are at the current flood risk or at the most flood risk currently, which haven't currently had some support. So whilst we can offer that, what was the third party support, was it?
Yeah, third party project, any project management?
It would depend on the scheme, I would say. We are limited in terms of resources, but our position with Shipston has been for quite a while. We're happy to kind of support the schemes and funding bids that go in. And there is a nuance to the national funding where we need to be involved. And as always, I'd be supportive of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Right, so I have Councillor Junid, Councillor Wally Hoggins and Councillor Rolfe. So,
Yeah, it's my experience in gathering data for 25 years in Ulster that people underreport. There may be a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it could be because of fears of insurance problems. It could be other reasons. But that does weaken the case for anything being done. What else can we do to encourage people to report? Because, for example, would you work more with people like myself over local data gathering, people on the ground, for example, because sometimes you can't actually get into the town if it's flooded. I really do feel that you need the data in order to be able to put your case forward.
So much of our work as a team during a flood event is data gathering and collating the most up-to-date picture. So our team as such isn't a first responder. We have other teams within the county that do that, but we support them during a flood event and try to get the best picture of what's going on at the time. Post-flood is when our team really kind of comes into play. Everywhere where we've had reports of internal property flooding, be that confirmed or unconfirmed, we will go out, knock on doors, often with support from other teams or other agencies such as the EA will come out with us, and we try to get the best picture that we can. I agree 100% with you that it's difficult to get a full report of the flood events that are happening. Not really relevant for this meeting, but we tend to struggle in the north of the county to get full reporting. Any support that we get from members, any other organisation to come forward, please do. The reporting mechanism on the website, it's a very simple tool to go on. It goes straight into our flood record. So the more you can point people towards that, the better picture we've got of what's going on, and we can make a better case going forward. An example we've had where we've struggled to get flood reports in was during Storm Henk. Storm Henk, the government activated a flood recovery framework, which is a number of schemes to support flooded residents, and we had to hit a certain threshold of properties before we were eligible in Warwickshire. So we went out to, I think Councillor Crump wrote to all elected members to kind of encourage them for people to come forward. We posted on social media for both Warwickshire and all of our districts and boroughs. Even now, we're still getting the occasional property come forward saying we would have liked that funding, but unfortunately the government rules are that the date was the cut-off was April, and we've missed that, and we're several months behind that. So any pointing towards our flood reporting tool, as well as our flood reporting tool on the website, there's also a highway flooding reporting tool where you can do the more minor issues such as gullies and the like, and they're both from the same link.
Thank you.
Councillor Crump would like to respond as well to that.
Just very briefly, I think Jack's covered most of it. I think we've all got a duty to play, and we'd rather receive the information 2 or 3 times than not at all for a certain property. I know the partners work together, and sometimes they, the EA or Severn Trent will know about some areas that we don't know about, and vice versa. So there's cross-fertilisation of ideas there. But I think we've all got a role to play. We encourage our residents, we encourage our towns and parishes. As a district, whether we in our communications, the View, or wherever there's the successor to the View, whether we have regular articles or features about that, about reporting. But Jag is right again. Sometimes there is a reluctance to report for the fear of it affecting insurance. And again, this is no pun. I couldn't think of a better analogy. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't get them. No, it wasn't deliberate on this occasion. Sorry, I'll put myself off. But I think, just report. And we'll get the messages, to district, county, town, parish, whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crump. Right, Councillor Wally Hoggins, please.
Hello, I'm the District Councillor for Brailes and Long Compton, so that incorporates, these names will be familiar to you, Cherrington, Stourton and of course delightful Brailes, that's Upper Brailes and Lower Brailes. So Jag and officers that are here today, I want you to imagine an octogenarian. She lives on a Jeff's Close and through her garden is a river or a tributary, a stream, for example. Most of the time, you could paddle in it and sail boats and have a wonderful poo sticks kind of a time. But when it's flooding, that becomes a raging torrent. It's got so bad now that when a flood event happens, that it's now eroding into her garden. Not only that, on the other side of this river, stream, rivulet, it's now the landscape is actually cascading towards that. The erosion is so severe, and the top of that is a road. So, Jag, I need you, please, to explain to me, and I need some joined-up thinking here, because we are talking about an octogenarian here. She's contacted her insurance company. They cannot help with this. She doesn't know what to do. She's contacted you or your department a couple of times, and she's been told, and has done this twice now, I can't remember the technical term because I'm not a scientist. She's been told and has complied with putting like sticks in the riverbed to try to stop the erosion from happening. And of course, the torrent is so high now that it just washes this away. So, and the department, and I believe you as well, Jag, the reaction to this is that any other measures that are going to be taken, you will require modelling to be done, which costs thousands of pounds to be done. And I do recall that in Brailes, because of major flood events there, the modelling didn't work, and your team or those that were undertaking the modelling at great expense abandoned the modelling because it didn't work. So what I'm looking for is, I want to know what the policy is for treating vulnerable people and why the inaction of Warwickshire, of holding others to account perhaps, is meaning that an old lady at great expense to herself is now vulnerable to actually a landslide event which will take out one road in Brailes, and she's been ignored because she doesn't have the money to do the modelling, and neither does she have any more money left in order to do what needs to be done. And this will have a massive impact upstream and downstream from where she is. So we sometimes do all the technical stuff, but at the heart of this, there are individual citizens of this country who just deserve better than no. We can't do this, we're not going to help, it's your problem. It's not her problem, this is everybody's problem, because if this isn't resolved. So this isn't a piece of case for everybody, this is just the treatment of older people who are vulnerable. And yes, she has had funding and work has been done to stop her property from having water egressing, but there is an oil tank at the back of her property, and should that go, and she's done all her remedial work to keep that safe, what exactly what are these sticks called, and what are you and your department going to do to protect these people and their property? Thank you.
So fortunately, that's a location I know well. So I know there's some misunderstandings there in your viewpoint of what's happened there. So we'll address the modelling we'll address the modelling in Brailes initially. So yes, we secured an allocation of funding from the DEFRA flood and coastal erosion programme to do works in Brailes, and we did a significant amount of modelling, and we could not get it to, we could not validate it to known flooding events in the area. So we put a lot of work in. We consulted with our partners at the Environment Agency. Their national scale modelling also doesn't fully reflect the flooding that we see in Brailes, and so we were not able to produce a cost beneficial business case that indicated the true risks to the area. And the end result was a property flood resilience scheme, which is still ongoing. And as you mentioned, the resident on Orchard Close, was it Orchard Close or Jeff's Close, sorry, has been included in that scheme, so she will have measures to protect her property. So that's the wider scheme. In terms of the watercourse running through her property, the stakes that went in to protect the bank were several years ago, and that was through to erosion. Watercourses will always find their natural path. So short of turning them into concrete canals, directing the flow immediately downstream, you're always going to have a level of erosion going in towards properties. And that's what's happened in this case. So the original stakes that went into the ground were part of a more natural solution to prevent the scour. That is now starting to fail several years down the line. And so work needs to be done to replace them, which is fairly typical on watercourses which have such an alignment as the one going through the back garden of this resident. We have not asked for any modelling in terms of providing erosion protection on the bank. We spoke to the resident. The resident appointed a contractor to do the works and design the works on her behalf. We have tried to engage with this contractor several times and not heard back. So we're kind of in a patch where, what do we do? We've made an effort and we are trying to talk to the contractor. We can continue, and that's all we do, and that's all we can do. In terms of the landslide on the other side, some of the detail around that appears to be that there was vegetation clearance on that, which has caused the bank to fall. The resident having a watercourse run through her property is a riparian landowner, so she will have responsibility to clear the blockage that's been caused by that landslip. There's no landslip yet, approximately 50% of the channel is currently full with material that's fallen from the garden.
As Jag, you haven't disappointed. Your attitude towards this has just been that we need to open channels of discussion. We have a vulnerable member of society living there, and we need to take action in order for this to there has to be some compromise here. I think mowing your grass or cutting down the brambles so they don't fall into the watercourse is very unfortunate, but this is just underlines the personal issues that are here. So we have to find a solution as to how we open and sort this matter out, because a road collapsing surely isn't this resident's fault. Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to declare that I'm a county councillor for Stratford South. Now, I'm just going to briefly go back to the original question from John Dinney, where he mentioned house building and the strain and the stress on the current drainage system. And I want to go back to what you said about developers being responsible for making sure that everything is fine. Well, sadly, I think we all know, and we all suffer from this as councillors, we all know that the developers will say, it's absolutely fine, no problem, don't even worry about it, it's fine. And because of lack of resources at the county council, you're not able to check. And very often, environmental agency do not comment on planning applications. Sometimes they don't, because they probably think a few houses up there isn't going to make a big impact on a street. So what I'm trying to say here is that we're all suffering from new developments. It's not going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. It's going to get a lot worse, because we're going to have more houses. I have a brilliant example. I have a road that was built, the Loxley Road, that was built in the 50s and the 60s with a Loxley Road 50s and 60s drainage system. And there's 270 houses stuck at the top of that road. So, the rain comes down. We are suffering from climate change. More rain comes down. And it comes down that ancient drainage system, and it causes intermittent flooding with bubbles of water coming out of drains. And in come Severn Trent to try and sort it out. Very often, Severn Trent are there trying to sort out the problems of over-exacerbated drains, if you like, that have come off new developments. So I go back to John Dinney's question, can we have a more rigorous, if you like, look at how the county, the environmental agency and Severn Trent respond to planning applications, knowing full well. And I mean, also, I think we ought to take into account that when new developments are built, that there's very little greenery on new developments because they're all cramped in. So we're exacerbating, we're taking away, in my situation, those beautiful fields that had natural drainage are now 270 houses with a lot of tarmac, very little greenery, exacerbating on an old drainage system. So I think I'd like to see a more rigorous approach to how we respond, because it comes back down the line to you guys. At the end of the day, Severn Trent are closing bits of the Loxley Road because the drainage system simply can't cope. And that's a tiny, tiny area in the whole of Stratford district. So I'd like to see a better solution. Thank you.
So, sorry, a lot of the questions are addressed to all the agencies, so we really need to hear the presentations from each of the agencies. So can you, Jack, can you hold that question till we've gone through the rest of them? Because I think that question was covering other agencies. So, right, can we take the presentation from Andrew Richardson from the Environment Agency, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so I'm Andrew Richardson, Flood Risk Advisor at the Environment Agency, and I cover Warwickshire in the most part. Next slide, please. So yeah, a little bit about what we do. This isn't everything, but some of the most relevant things. We respond to incidents, so a lot of that most relevant here will be flooding incidents, where we respond to planning applications, where we're statutory consultees. We have a large database, if you like, of hydraulic flood modelling for lots of water classes throughout the area. We are in charge of the flood risk activity permitting, so that's in addition or separate to planning applications. We work on our flood defence programme, and we also respond to freedom of information requests, and I suppose specifically in relation to this, it's mostly regarding that hydraulic flood modelling. We also get a lot of insurance-related requests and people looking at buying houses and flood risk reports and things like that. So next slide, please. So particularly on the flood risk defence project side of things, we've got a 6-year programme, runs from April 21, March 27. It's £5.2 billion in that. That's spread over the country. That's just England, with a target which has actually now been revised down slightly, 336,000 properties better protected. It was 300,000 in the last 6-year programme, and our funding was half what it was in the last 6-year programme. It was half what it is now. Next slide, please. So we've got that big national 6-year programme. We break that down. We've got West Midlands area targets, so that's covering up from Stoke down to the Avon, and that's broken down even further for places like Warwickshire, where we've got in the region of, we're expecting to spend across that 6-year period in the region of like around £8 to £10 million of funding, and we're expected to find an additional around £9 million of funding from partners and other organisations on that. Next slide. So we're trying to deliver as much as we can with the money we've got. Quite often we find we're short of money, so we try and get as much bang for our buck as we can. So to do that, we have a process or groups called catchment-based groups. So we've got the Warwickshire catchment-based group, and essentially how that works is that it's along the same analogy of you want your roads dug up once and do all the utilities as opposed to keep coming back doing it over and over again. It should be cheaper to do it once. So we get a lot of input from our flood risk team, so myself, fisheries, biodiversity, our asset performance team, so the team's in charge of maintaining our assets, water quality, community engagement, flood resilience, and other teams will be inputting as well. And the idea is that if we have lots of people inputting, then we can spot efficiencies and things like that. So that's all fed in so that the catchment-based groups can deliver as much benefit as possible out the bottom there: flood reduction, biodiversity gain, water quality improvement, improved resilience. And so that's the mechanism that we're trying to deliver the programme, that big national programme. That's how it's broken down to the Warwickshire sort of level. Just next slide, please. So I've not gone into a whole load of detail because I've sensed a lot of specific questions. So I'll just up there are a lot of our contact details for the different routes, whether that's permitting, planning applications, how to report an incident. So one of the questions earlier was about getting as good a picture of flood risk as we can. So really how you can do that, well, you can email myself, but we also have a national incident reporting service, a phone number you can ring. You can also basically, if you send it to any of the email addresses up there, it will get to us eventually, but really the best way is report an incident one. So I'd just like to highlight that contact route there. I just remember as well, so one of the earlier questions, I think from Mike, was around, are we going to use the town council's landowner contacts to help with NFM development around Shipston? I think the answer is yes. So we recently completed some modelling for the area. And so a couple of weeks ago, we sort of had that modelling fully delivered, sort of signed off. We've got that, we're happy now, and we've spun up sort of in the catchment-based group a project to assess what we can deliver there. So and NFM absolutely is one of the things that we want to deliver. So we're sort of taking an approach where when we assess like a list of options, whether that's, say your traditional flood scheme, your softer, concrete or grass or whatever, we're adding in and natural flood risk management to the end of all of those options, as well as looking at it as an option on its own. So we are trying to deliver that NFM any way we can, even if it is by attaching it to some concrete, doing something as well. We're trying to attach NFM like that. And yes, landowner engagement is, is key in natural flood risk management. It can't happen without them. So we'll absolutely, yes, please use your contacts for that. Thank you.
Right. So I think we better move on to the next presentation and then Councillor Rolfe to ask the first question. Sorry? Specifically for the environment, okay. Right, okay, but we'll take two questions specifically for the Environment Agency.
It's a very important one, I think, and it's about flood zones. And I think you'll agree that the flood zone zoning is a little out of date and hasn't been updated for a while. And I think it has a huge impact on planning. And so I think the sooner we can look at this, I mean, there have been planning applications that have gone through because they're only in flood zone 3. But actually, if you recategorise it, they probably might have been in flood zone 2 or even flood zone 1. And I think it's been a real problem because even if it is only in flood zone 3, the more you put there, the more it exacerbates the flooding risk. And I think I would like to see, I know Manuela, our MP, has been, Manuela Pertegela, has been working with this. I've been working with her to try and get the rezoning of some of the flood zones. And I think it's really important for us as a planning authority to know the new categories, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, so flood zones, yeah, absolutely are key. So they're a big part in planning. So they'll dictate whether the exception tests need to be passed or whether something is just outright inappropriate development, like, for instance, homes in the functional floodplain, flood zone 3B. So as for updating the flood zones, so flood zones are updated by our hydraulic flood modelling. We have to use the best available information. We always will, and we can only replace that if better information, we come across it, we have it, we produce it. We're not sort of always refreshing the models for all our watercourses. Some of them will be 10 years, 12 years old, and that does happen. Eventually, we will get round to producing a new model. But part of the reason, say, we're not, is that, so, for example, the River Avon, we've just started a project to remodel the River Avon. That's going to be, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds and take a couple of years. I think it's in for 2 years. So I guess I'm saying they are big jobs that take a lot of money, and we don't always have that money. Yeah.
Councillor Keithley.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, Andrew. That was interesting. My question really follows up what Councillor Rov just asked about flood modelling and some of the zones being out of date. What you said on your slides, or put forward on your slides, was that there was a 6-year programme that you're working to, which started in 2021. I saw it finished in 2027. I think there's a sense in the communities that perhaps we're getting behind the ball because climate seems to be changing so much faster than we expected. It's almost overtaking us. So my question really is about when you're going to start reviewing that 6-year programme, because if you were putting that programme together, let's say 5 years ago, the picture would probably look quite different to how it is today. So is there going to be a rolling programme rather than a fixed programme? And where are we? Because I guess this programme is going to will be what you're using to go to the ministers to get the funding that you require to deliver on these sort of strategies and the work that you undertake. You've mentioned a number of times that resources are tight, but if we're being overtaken by events, then it's important that your sort of strategic plan keeps up with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. So for the 6-year programme, how that effectively starts is with a big spreadsheet called the FCRM1, and it's got thousands of projects on there in a list. What it doesn't spell out is when you should do them. What we also aren't stopped from doing is adding or removing them. So it's not set in stone. And what we use like the catchment-based groups for is, I think of them as like incubators for projects. So we might hear, we might get a new flourish of reports of flooding in a particular area after Storm Henk, say. We are aware of there's water quality issues there. The catchment-based group will come together, talk about it. We'll put together a bit of a sort of like project introduction. We'll basically apply to have that added in, and so that is something we have and are doing. I do take your point that yes, we're not super quick moving. Projects do take years to spin up and get going and get to a stage where you are on the ground. So we are aware we need to adapt. It does take longer than we would like, but yeah, no, we absolutely take the point that adaptation is key.
So, right, so we move on to the presentation from Severn Trent, and Tim Smith is going to present.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and good morning all. I'm going to go through some slides very briefly. Thank you, Howard. So just a brief introduction. My name is Tim Smith. I've been at Severn Trent for coming up to 15 years now. I'm the Flood Partnerships Manager, and principally my role is to ensure that we are undertaking flood risk management activities in partnership. That was really embedded within the spirit in legislation, the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. So thanks, Howard. As Severn Trent, we cover a large area, 28 lead local flood authorities in our patch. I've got a regional role, so interact with all 28 lead local flood authorities. We've got nearly 80 district and borough councils in the patch as well. So it's a large area, and we work in 5-year periods, unfortunately not 6-year periods, but we do our best to try and align those. We've heard about the 6-year programme. Yes, and it's a key time at the moment as we look to finalise our next 5-year plan, 2025 onwards. Next slide, please, Howard, thanks. We've got a range of functions at Severn Trent, taking raw water, cleaning it up, putting it into water supply, and then taking that wastewater away and safely returning it to the environment. From a flooding perspective, I think it's important to say that our network is subject to flooding, so we are flooded, our assets do get flooded, but we're also a source of flooding, principally in the areas that we work is around the source of flooding can be our sewer network, which is what people might be familiar with. So the key point there is we're at risk of flooding, but we're also a source of flooding, and that's part of our role in flood risk management. Next slide, please, Howard. So our role, we've got Warwickshire here as the lead local flood authority, environment agency. You can see the responsibilities split up there. Our role in terms of flood risk management is managing flood risk from the sewer network. And that's what was defined neatly within the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. But in practice, you know, there's often overlaps and grey areas, and you know, we need to be working together to manage flooding in partnership. So next one, please. Our core flood risk management duties as a water authority, as a sewerage undertaker, are embedded within the Water Industry Act, Section 94, and this phrase, effectually drain. That means we have a responsibility to take wastewater from properties, and the diagram on the left-hand side, you can see that's wastewater from properties in red, and that will go into a foul sewer. We also have a duty to take the surface water runoff from properties, that's roofs, and the areas around those properties, and that's shown in diagram in blue. Now, some areas have separate sewers, so you get the wastewater going into the red, the foul sewers, and the surface water going into the blue, the surface water sewers. But in some instances, those pipes do combine, and they go into one. That's the combined sewers, which you'll no doubt be familiar with. It's been quite high on the agenda in the media past couple of years. So we also accept flows from industry and also runoff from roads. So there's a lot of runoff from roads goes into the sewer system as well. So that's our core duty. It's not an absolute duty, not an absolute legal duty, but that is what we do, and to make sure that we're taking that wastewater away and treating it. Okay, next slide, please, Howard. I'm probably not going to dwell on this, but if we've got questions about combined sewers, we can come back to that. But combined sewers overflows, if you can go on to the next one, Howard, act as relief valves that were integrated into the network during the Victorian times and afterwards, where you've got the wastewater and the surface water runoff in one pipe, that in heavy rain, rather than it causing flooding to urban areas, there is a way in which that finds its way, that dilute sewage, into the rivers, and those are via these combined sewer overflows. That's probably a whole nother scrutiny committee in itself. So if we can go on to the next slide. So flooding, our world, we generally divide flooding into two categories. So the operational flooding, so is the pipe collapsed, is the pipe blocked, is there some equipment failure? That's largely around 70–80% of our effort, our issues on our network are what we call these operational. So that's making sure our network that's there is as operational as possible. I did forget to say, in the Severn Trent region, we've got about 93,000 kilometres of sewers. That's 3 round trips to Australia. So that's a large network to be managing. The second type of flooding is capacity. So simply, the system can't cope with the amount of wastewater or rainwater that's getting in. And that results, as you can see in the top 2 diagrams, a system where the network just overloads and comes out via manholes or drains. And that's we're in the business of trying to reduce that as much as possible and targeting our efforts to make sure our network is as operational as best we can and the right capacity is there. Next one, please, Howard. So just a brief range of list of activities. We've had a good question around proactive versus reactive. We carry out both. We have a lot of reactive activities, maintenance, repairs, but we also have a lot of proactive activities as well, cameraing our network, lining our network, clearing blockages, increasing the capacity of our network, lots of modelling as well, and trying to reduce that risk. So again, we can touch on that in more detail in questions, but if you could go on to the next one. There's definitely been some interest and some questions around new developments. I just wanted to touch on this before I finish. We will look at the potential for new development to impact our network and connections onto our network over a range of different time periods. So we'll look at, up to 2025 through our drainage and wastewater management plans. What is the long-term impact of growth on our network? What do we have to do to manage that? Then you've got the engagement with local plans, water cycle studies, which we've done in this area as well. And then you're moving into the individual planning applications, which is more the team that Bill looks after. So, and then the engagement with developers when they are on site constructing their new sites and then want to connect to our network. So we do have that engagement. We are not a statutory consultee to planning, but we do respond to planning applications. That is a very good point, and it's something that is. Yeah, I think one of the other key areas is there is still currently a automatic right to connect. So we do have discussions with developers, but when push comes to shove, a developer can connect at a location and at a point and at a rate they choose, and we have to ensure that we can accommodate that. And that is something that's being looked at through Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, but that's not enacted yet. So it is a tricky area. There was a case back in 2009, Barratt Homes versus Welsh Water, and there was a disagreement between the developer and Welsh Water at the time, and the Supreme Court ruled in favour of Barratt Homes. Therefore, we, as a water industry, are not at liberty to say you cannot connect, the system can't cope. The onus is on us to say we have to accommodate that flow. We have good relationships with developers at times, and we manage that, and sometimes it's phased, but we do not hold all the power in terms of managing new developments, and that's why it's so important for us to work with the planning authorities in order to help manage that. So if we can move on to the next one, I think I'm nearly done, which you may be grateful for. That's a long-term look, drainage and wastewater management plans. If you're interested in those, we've just published them for the first time. That's a government, Ofwat, an environment agency supported activity where they said to the water industry, you need to take a long-term look at your capacity of your network, treatment works, and plan for the future and make sure that's visible to the public. So there's lots of information there. I can talk about that in questions. I think I'm done, Howard. There might be... there's something local there that's quite unique to Shropshire and to this area. Some benefits that we are delivering at the moment around improving discharges into the watercourse so that it can achieve the equivalent of bathing river standards. So there's a lot of work that's been going on the LEM, which also has some significant benefits downstream in Stratford as well. So again, we can get onto that outside the meeting or in questions, but that's a local initiative that I thought I'd mention as well. So that's me. I know I haven't answered all the questions, but I can take questions on the presentation and also follow up on some of the questions that you said at the start to come into more detail.
Thanks, Tim. Right, I have a number of questions. First, Councillor Whaley-Hoggins, please.
Hi, it'll come as no surprise that I'm about to bring up Cherrington-Stourton. As you're well aware, there's been a number of, well, it floods every single time there is heavy rainfall, there is flooding in Cherrington, and it affects gardens. I've got, again, residents of all ages, mainly the elderly, you know, waking up to, you know, solids in the garden, prophylactics. It's just not on, and we just don't seem to be getting anywhere. We had a very constructive meeting earlier this year when promises were made, investigations have clearly been undertaken, but we've had no follow-up meeting from yourselves as to what the next steps are. We all know what needs to happen. There needs to be a better facility. We've got housing programmes coming down the line to say, you know, there's going to be at least, you've got Brailes and Cherrington-Stourton. What exactly are you doing on a local level, and what are your plans for keeping residents informed of the work that you do? Because I'm not alone as a councillor. We take all the flack here. We get the phone calls because perhaps Severn Trent are not as responsive as we would like them to be, you know, and it actually boils down to, you know, communications really. Relying on emails and text messages isn't the best way. Small village, all you need to do is, I'll even deliver them for you. Leaflets, here's an update to what we're doing in your area and what the solution is going to be. We know there needs to be a new sewage system down there to cope with the houses, but what are you doing? You've got to put these residents, and it's my message to all of you, is behind every single flood event, behind everything that happens, everything, there are human beings that are distressed, and as councillors we take a lot of those phone calls. I don't have a magic wand. It isn't included in the kit bag when you win an election. I'm sure you don't like magic wands, but the difference between us and you is that you have the budget in order to rectify the situation for these residents. And the River Stour in Cherrington-Stourton is in an appalling state. The pollution levels are intolerable, and I've been like this forever and ever. And I need this. I need some reassurance from you today. You can either follow it with me personally in a meeting, but I need to know, what is Severn Trent going to do about the situation? We cannot have the continual blaming this, blaming that. You need to be better. It is capacity, all right? It is from all that, the runoff and flow off, but people have more and more toilets installed. Housing happens just by creep. A house here and a house there, it affects. What are you going to do? What are you doing? What are you doing about your comm strategy as well? Thank you.
I couldn't agree more that we need to make sure that at the heart of this it's people, isn't it? And they're affected. So, yeah, I think I'm not familiar with the issues at Cherrington. I'd like to follow up with you. I know our local teams have been dealing with some issues. I know we've looked at the impact of future growth on our network. We are upgrading a number of sewage treatment works in the area this 5-year period and the next 5-year period. There's a lot of work at treatment works going on. We have got plans in the pipeline. I don't know whether it relates to this specific area. Apologies, Councillor, I don't know the specifics, but we do have some, say, plans at treatment works and also emerging plans on the network, but I'm going to have to take away and get the local team, and perhaps we can have a meeting or a discussion, because I agree emails and texts can get a bit lost. So happy to follow up about Cherrington in particular.
I think it is about the accountability, really, for me, is that, you know, as you say, I send an email or I make a text message and it just gets lost. So it is about that accountability, really, and the book has to stop. You know, people earn certain levels of salary, and actually the book ends up stopping. So I would welcome that opportunity, please, to take this offline and to perhaps meet and at the location where this is happening as well. It's really that important, and I need you, I presume, as a manager, to come out and see the issues and speak to the residents. It is distressing. Thank you.
No, I hear you, and I have sympathies as well. I know we're here in a professional capacity, but on a person-to-person basis, it's very distressing, and especially if that's compounded, if it feels like there's a lack of communication. So I'd like the opportunity to try and do better and rectify that.
thank you. It's getting on for 11:30 now, so we've been going for an hour and a half already, and we have other business. I've got 3 more questions. Can I ask that they're precise and that they're not repeating what we've already been asking? So first of all, I have Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you. I'm going to big you up here because I've never had a problem with communication with Severn Trent. So I just want to say that whenever I've contacted you, it's been absolutely fine. And thank you for what you do. However, I am absolutely gobsmacked you're not a statutory consultee. Are you a statutory consultee in other areas within your Severn Trent? Or you're not a statutory consultee to any council? And I have another question. Right, okay. The second question is, this automatic right to connect is a worrying thing to me, because if they have an automatic right to connect and they connect and things go a little awry and a little wrong, who is then responsible for making it right? Does it come down to you? Presumably it does. Or does it can you turn around and say, hang on a second, developers, you put that in against our wishes, so you pay for it. How does that work if they have an automatic right to connect? And also, when a new development does come along, as I mentioned earlier, when they presumably at no stage are you spoken to until a development is given planning permission. You don't know about it, presumably, because you're not a consultee, correct? So if you don't know about it and then they come and say, right, we're going to put 270 houses on a 50s drainage system down a road, you have to presumably make the best you can of that situation, because otherwise they're going to have an automatic right to connect. So how does it work?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll pick that up. But statutory consultee-wise, we are not statutory consultees in England. We are for Welsh Water. So because of the government, the situation there with the Welsh Water, we look after Powys area as part of Severn Trent. We are statutory consultees for Powys and anything in the Welsh Water area.
Yeah.
For anything to do with the Welsh Assembly, we are statutory consultees. In England, obviously Scotland, we're not at all. Obviously, we're not to do with Scotland laws.
Would you like to be statutory consultees?
It's to be, in all honesty, and I
It's as long as it's,
there's pros and cons.
Yeah,
There
okay.
are pros and cons. It would help in the context of this discussion.
Yeah.
But it would mean a lot more resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So we're not, and we just have to live with that. Having said that, we are consulted. So Stratford-on-Avon Council consults Severn Trent on some planning applications. I can't say if it's all of them. Part of my team's responsibility is that we respond to those consultations. So we are made aware. It's a little bit late in the day, as you say, because by the time a developer puts planning in, he's pretty much ready to go. We can't object. We've tried to object in the past, but we've had various legal sort of involvement and advice regarding appeals and inquiry committees, etc., etc. We can't. Our view legally is that water companies cannot actually object because of this intrinsic right to connect. The two things just don't work together. So there is that right to connect. As Tim alluded to, if Schedule 3 of the Water Fluid Management Act comes into pass, that will change that, hopefully, but that's not happened yet. So we have to live with it. So basically what we do in our response is we look at a planning application, we look at the situation, we might do some modelling, and if we have a concern, we raise that concern in our response to that consultation. And we'll raise that concern with the planning authority and say, we've got a problem here, or we've got concerns here, we suspect there'll be exacerbated flooding, etc., etc. And that's all we can do, really. That's all that we can raise that concern. Behind the scenes, we would then look at that situation and we would try and put some improvements in place before that development proceeds. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. It's to do with money, of course, because it costs a lot of money to improve our network. And we have to prioritise because we've got limited funds like everybody has, and we'll improve an area over here, which means we can't improve an area over here because we just haven't got limitless cash. So we try and do what we can do. One of the things I would like to get across here is that, and one of the questions, the original question was about early engagement with Severn Trent, with the planning authority. I'm coming here to say I want that early engagement. and the earlier the better as far as I'm concerned, and my team could pick that up, because especially with developers, once they've gone down a certain route, they said they don't want to change. But if we can get early engagement with the planning authority and the developer together, we can talk about SUDs, features, keeping the system clear of sewage water, etc., etc. We can get that sort of discussion. We can't force that. The water companies have no power to force a SUD solution, for example, on the housing side. They haven't just done have that sort of power. And going back to the Supreme Court case that Tim alluded to, the part of that ruling made it clear that they expected the planning process to be used to manage that issue. And I could give you the copy of it if it actually states that. So this is the key, really, for me. It's
Very quick follow-up, if I may. So, you would like early engagement, and I think that is, that's what we need to do. So, we're going through the process of setting out our core plan until 2050. Are you being engaged with Stratford District and Warwick District Council of the combined core plan? Are you being engaged with?
So there is a team and identified officers who've got that as part of their role. We have responded to the, looking at my notes, to the Stratford site allocations plan a few years ago. I'm seeing some nods, that's good. And then we also responded to the South Warwickshire local plan, which I understand was a sort of collaboration between Warwick District Council and yourselves. And we have also more recently responded to JBA, who are consultants doing the water cycle study for the local plan. Whether that's sufficient, I know, talking to the officers in prep for this meeting, that we felt that we would welcome more information about where sites might be coming on in the plan. So I think there has been some engagement. Felt like to me that we could do more together. Probably a good summary.
I think this is a wonderful opportunity to make... Sorry, Mr Perks.
It might be helpful just to give an update on the local plan. Yes, we would be looking to engage with the water companies. In terms of early engagement, that's the best place to do it. We're under unerring pressure to provide development within the country, and a lot of that will come to this district. We're working through the South Warwickshire local plan to show how we intend to sort of deliver that to 2050, and sort of sewerage and water infrastructure is a key part to it. Where we are with that plan at the moment is we're just about to consult on our preferred options, which will be when we start to sort of find sort of key locations where a substantial amount of that development will be planned for. And I think that would be really useful for your infrastructure plans going forward, and engaging at that level would be probably the early engagement we're looking for. We can then develop that into more detailed dialogue once we get to sort of specific sites and specific developers, but we need to be having an eye to where we're going in sort of in the long medium term. So that's very live at the moment. We hope to be consulting that on the end of the year, and we'd certainly value your input to that.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, Councillor Littlewood.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to repeat what's already been said. Your customers are in rural areas find it very unsatisfactory in the way in which your department communicates. I think that's already been said. I don't want to go. I've got several instances, and maybe it's because it's in my ward's a rural ward, and perhaps the infrastructure is very old. I did attend a meeting at Severn Trent's invitation at Stoneleigh earlier in the year, and part of that theme was that there was going to be a change of culture within the organisation to be more engaging and more responsive to customer issues. I haven't seen that. Now, I don't want to go through details here, but what I would like to ask is that if I leave one of you gentlemen my card, that we have a meeting offline from here and not take any more of this committee's time. But please don't think, because I'm not going to sort of name and shame incidents, that it's not so severe. It is very severe. The issues of contamination of gardens, private properties, other watercourses is a major problem, and responsiveness is limited. One example of a domestic supply on the Severn Trent side leaked badly, pipes or the connection severed, and the customer was told, we'll have somebody out maybe in 7 to 10 days' time. Well, when you've got gushing water going through your property, that's not a very acceptable thing. Luckily, somebody who's obviously had the change of culture training happened to be in the village looking for leaks because I've noticed a drop in pressure. So he was grabbed and he said, yes, there's a leak here. Well, that was pretty obvious because the water was going through at several gallons a second. So, yeah, please, would you, if I leave a card, would you please contact me? And I want to go through in detail discussions. Thank you, Chair.
Right. So, Councillor Keithley, please.
Am I the last? Oh, right, okay. Well, I'll just start by thanking you all for coming, because it's been a bit of an eye-opener for me. I've learned a lot today from all your presentations. Picking up a question really aimed at Tim, really. What I would say is that this responsiveness issue's come up quite a bit today, but it seems to have been varied. I've got my own examples in my village. Severn Trent came out within 24 hours. Absolutely no problem. Onto my property twice, actually. I had no difficulty at all in that. A question to you, I suppose, Tim, is whether or not you are concerned about the government's programme to build so many more houses, because that's going to really impact on your operational and capacity issues, especially if you're working on a 5-year cycle. We're working on a sort of 20 or 30-year plan. We know we're going to be under a lot of pressure. Are you concerned about all this additional housing and your ability to keep up with it? I do accept, I think we all accept, you've got a very, very difficult job to do, to maintain and upgrade an elderly network when the demands on you are growing exponentially. So that's my question. I would just light-heartedly just say, that's the first time I'd heard about a bathing river. We're all going to be going down to Leamington with a bar of soap, by the looks of it, once you get that, in order, because it will save us some money on our water bills. Back to you on that. You know, how concerned are you about all these houses?
I'll touch on the bathing rivers. We're trying to remove a lot of phosphorus from rivers, so please do enjoy the high quality, but maybe forget the soap. But no, onto the serious question around growth. I think yes, I think it does concern us, the scale of potential new developments, but part of that is the timing. So if we have sufficient time to plan, sufficient funds to put the measures in place, then it's not a concern to us. But it's the timing. Can we phase things quick enough? Because it sometimes takes, to make an upgrade to a treatment works, plan the infrastructure for, it's a highly connected sewer network in some locations. You can't just increase capacity in one little bit. You've got to then think about the downstream pumping station, and then the rising main that connects into another system, to another storage tank, to another pumping station. It's a quite an integrated network. So it's it is a concern, but it comes down to, do we have the, are we going to be able to plan in time? Breaking down that concern, it's about the time, and do we have the funding to then put those measures in place? And we've just gone back to Ofwat earlier this week. Lots of toing and froing with our response to Ofwat's response to our plan. So we work in this 5-year periods. We will find out later on this year whether we've been successful with Ofwat in asking for more funding available to upgrade our networks, upgrade our treatment works to accommodate new development. So that's part of our ask.
That obviously raises the issue of early engagement in our South Warwickshire local plan process, so that you've got a very clear indication of where this extra demand is going to be on your capacity.
Councillor Junid.
Much of this area is actually has the problem of combined stormwater sewage. We've got medieval Victorian properties and that does require a major investment. My question is, where is this investment to come from and what plans have you actually in place to work with bodies such as the government and Ofwat to make sure that that investment is put into place? Because we will not solve the problem in the rivers unless we get the infrastructure in place to be able to deal with the overflows that come from combined stormwater and sewage in this kind of district. So what plans have you got for the investment?
It's a great question. On the matter of storm overflows, the past couple of years has been really challenging, and but off the back of this, we are proposing a vast increase in investment in the sewer network to reduce discharges from combined sewer overflows. We're looking at over £1 billion programme that we've asked Ofwat to approve across the Severn Trent region. We've got, we're looking at, I can forget the numbers, there's about 74 storm overflows in the Stratford-on-Avon District Council area, and we've done prioritisation, and we're looking at dealing with and investing specifically in around 15 in the next 5-year period, and we've now got statutory targets to reduce those frequency of discharges down to a minimum of 10 on an average year by 2050. We're going faster, and we're investing. We're doing stuff now. You know, the last slide that I shared, that's work that we're doing in advance to bring down the number and the impact of those discharges. So in terms of investment, it's a huge investment that we're planning, a massive step change in the infrastructure on the sewer network to reduce the incidence, the number, frequency of those storm overflow discharges. And that, the idea is that will also generally bring some other benefits in terms of less flooding on the network as well. But it's essentially increasing the capacity of the network so it doesn't need to discharge into rivers so frequently.
And if I just mind, that investment is secured, and is it over, am I understanding that that's over a 5-year period with secured funding already agreed?
Ofwat have come back to us at what they call their draft decision. So we've presented the plan in October last year. They came back to us in July this year with the red pen, as it were. We've gone back to them this week and said, here's our corrections. They will come back to us at the end of the year with a final allocation of this is what you've got, this is what you have to deliver over the next 5 years. So it's not quite secured, but we're getting close.
And could you possibly come back in maybe a year or so's time to report back to us and update us and make sure that we know that progress has been made?
Isn't that under the gift of the chair of the Scrutiny Committee?
Right. Right. First, I think you wanted to respond, didn't you?
Well, it was actually a question from myself to the Environment Agency. Obviously, we mentioned about the new government wanting to build 1.5 million homes and the pressure, etc., on things. Obviously, there's been an alleged black hole that's been discovered of 18 to 22 billion, depending on where you read. And then obviously, there's already been some proposals to cut the winter fuel allowance. I'm concerned, or is the Environment Agency had any details about their budgets for 25-26 onwards? Is there likely to be some cut in that budget? So if that budget is cut, it could potentially mean less money being spent, revenue and capital, in Warwickshire and particularly in Stratford district. So just some indication of what the budgets for 25-26 onwards or for several years, both for revenue and capital, or is it too early yet?
So I guess I'm not aware of all of that, but I do know specifically, like in regard to like the 6-year programme, the 5.2. I think that's much more secure. I don't know if they're going to make some cuts more to the revenue side, but I don't think the capitals particularly. No, I've certainly not heard anything, but and again, I probably wouldn't be the first to be told. So yeah.
No, that's brilliant. And obviously we know that with inflation, even though it is stabilised now, £5.2 billion spent over, in 5 years' time, you won't get as much for your money as if you're spending your £5.2 million now, sort of thing. So again, we'd have to be interested in any inflation amounts added to that, or whether that, because if they're not added on, that's basically a cut to what you can do. So just some thoughts about that. Thank you.
Mr. Perks would like to respond, and then we'll have to go to a break. But Mr. Perks.
Yeah, it's not so much a response. It was just some clarity to make sure that we've got a clear understanding as a committee. And in terms of the investment plans and the business with Ofwat, is that connected to your ability to how much you're allowed to raise the water bills this year? Are those two things that you said? It is the same thing that the 59% we've heard from Thames is how the investment plan we funded. And so I'm just thinking when that comes up at scrutiny that we remember that it was the increases was justified the investment in the network. So just clarifying that. Thank you.
One more question from
it would be
Councillor
useful
Tudor.
to put things into context. The Environment Agency, it would be useful. I know from experience that you've had a considerable amount of cuts over many years, the last decades. It would be useful to be able to put that into context. Severn Trent, it would be useful to be able to put into context whether this money is coming from the bill payer or whether it's coming from the people that invest and the shareholders.
It's both, from our point of view, yeah. I'll keep it short, sorry.
Okay, thanks. It is 11:45 now, so any other questions can we take offline? I've got one that I don't think has been responded to, which was the clearing of highway drains, which I can talk to. So anyway, we're going to have a break now, but thank.
Sorry, but can we take that now because I asked it and John Dinny asked it and it's not been answered.
Right.
So that would be a question that would generally have to be directed towards county highways. I can't speak on their behalf, but I do know there are cyclic cleansing cycles to clear all the gullies. Some are put on a more frequent cleanse, some are on a semi-frequent, and some. So they now have data readers which understand how much silt is in the gullies when they clear it, and then they can direct it into areas that need cleansing more often. But yeah, that'll be something highways can tell you in more detail. I think the question spoke about gullies that were not cleansed when the rest of the road was cleared. That can be for a number of reasons. I've worked in highways in the past. Vehicles may be parked over it at the time, so they will have marked it up, but I'm sure they would appreciate any reports of gullies that were missed, and they will add it to their list to go back to.
So I think I also raised that with Councillor Junior, that Council did in coordination of when the grass was cut, and obviously gets blown into the gullies, into the street, and where there should be some coordination between the street sweeping and the grass cutting. So that was just another item.
Right. Thank you for all the questions, and thank you very much to all the speakers and representatives from the agencies. So, right, thanks. We're going to take a break now.
And can we be back by... next.
Right. Yeah, I agree that just circulating the parish clerks or the town clerks doesn't really percolate through, does it, to the people that need to know about the subjects coming on. But over the last few months, because we had the ICB coming in, I contacted all the people I knew that were active doing things about the Ellen Badger Hospital, and I asked them if they wanted to speak, and we had some speakers. And it was the same with flooding today. I got informed the town council, the people that were involved, and SAFAG, and got them to send in questions. So I think it's more of a way of members of this committee identifying who in the community would be interested in coming along to this meeting and hearing the people that are being scrutinised and adding a contribution to that.
Yeah, and we've had members of the public before, haven't we, to do with Orbit, and it was also to do with the U-bus, wasn't it? So that came in online, so yeah, that was really good. So I've got Councillor Henry-Seraphin and then Councillor Keithley.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree. As a Studley Parish Councillor myself, I think the connections with Parish Council and information and definitely always keeping them informed is a priority, really. We should not, in the past it's been too distant, so the more connections, the more information, the better.
Right. Councillor Johnson, did you indicate? Oh, yeah, good man, thank you. Councillor Keithley, do you want to have the final word on this, please? Or do you want to have the next word? It might turn out to be the final word. There. I didn't say that. I'll refine what I've said.
Thank you, Chair. This is a more general question about the future work programme. You are okay with taking that observation now?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so we all know, don't we, sitting around here, that this is a busy committee with a lot of work coming through it. But I think that the work programme needs to be quite smart about what it spends its time on and what it ends up discussing. If you turn to the appendix, you'll see there's a sort of scoring system which attempts to sort of prioritise the work and rank the importance of the work that comes to this committee. I think that's to be applauded. I'm not sure it's particularly scientific, but at least it's something rather than nothing, so that's got to be a good start. But one or two things that I would just specifically comment on. First of all, the proposal to bring housing associations to this committee by rotation. I think I've been disappointed, to be truthful, in what we've seen so far. We've only had a few in. We tend to get mission statements and, all things great about what they do. We've set up a task and finish group which is reported, and we should now be receiving reports on performance. My view is that that is the vehicle to monitor the work of the housing associations. Yeah. That is the vehicle to use to monitor the performance of the housing associations and report performance reports, rather than to keep bringing ad hoc the next housing association in here to waste an hour or so to tell us how good they are, rather than how bad they are. That's one thing. The second thing is that budget task and finish group scores a 7, and I'm not sure that personally, I'm not sure there needs to be a task and finish group to look at that. That takes a lot of time. It's a very highly detailed piece of work. So what I'm saying is that I think we need to be smart about what we choose to put on this work programme, and where we can, we delegate the authority to either groups of officers or to working groups that are set up to report on these matters, so that we're not, we're saved the time in having people coming along to tell us what too much detail, basically.
Yep, no, I
Thank you, Chair.
Totally agree. I think that's a fair point, because again, we questioned the SIL allocation process, didn't we, and the scoring. So, we'd be a bit hypocritical if we weren't challenging ourselves, because we didn't think it's necessarily covering all the bases or 100% fit for purpose. So I think that is a fair point. We do need to look at this, and sometimes I think ourselves as members of this committee need to go and do some homework ourselves between the meetings, as if to say what we really want from our work plan and what we're going to get out of it. And you know, when we suggest items for the work plan in the future, I want to suggest X because of Y, and hopefully the outcomes are Z. So we can have some more, you know, it's almost like explaining, you've done your homework and you've explained the reasons for doing so. So I'm not trying to give people, members of the committee work, but I think if we can just be a bit more precise what we want and what we want to see from it, I think that's fair. Not because, you know, residents do have an input, but let's have a look at the facts, let's have all the details, and I've had so many complaints about flooding in this area because of X, and therefore my residents want this bringing forward, and we've got some examples rather than just, you know, a bit of anecdotal evidence. So I think that's fair. The point about housing association, I think we can touch on in the next item as well, Stuart, if that's helpful. But I'm proposing that well done, Peter, good lad. I'm proposing that we task Mr. Perks or somebody to give us some feedback on how we can communicate better. We talked about the citizen panels, we've talked about WOLC, and we've also, I think we need to advertise that we do present the information, and also getting feedback from parishes and town councils and residents on future items for the work programme. But with that caveat, I'm proposing that we accept the recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4, 2 to here and 2 to the council, as set out in item number 6 on this committee's. Are we happy with that? Thank you. So now move on to item 7, which is the Task and Finish Housing Associations Working Group. And I think, you know, Councillor Keithley's raised some good points about potentially not having the work, you know, bring them in, having the, I was going to say rogues gallery, having partners coming in to speak to us, but to use the Task and Finish group to look at the feedback and what they're reporting back to us as part of the in-depth questionnaire that we sweat blood, tears over it over the last 12 months. So I think that might be interesting as part of the terms of reference for that Task and Finish group. So that's my initial thoughts. Councillor Littlewood.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with what you've just said. I think perhaps if the view to take with this is the Task and Finish group for housing associations does the legwork, has the questions, and then if that throws up real serious issues or recommendations for any particular group, then that could then be reviewed at over scrutiny full committee.
I think that's very sensible, Councillor Littlewood. I'm getting some nods there. I think that's fair. Any other comments on this? Councillor Holly Hoggins, please.
Yeah, and just to say, it's really important after the body of work that we did with the housing associations that we keep the momentum going. That it's you know, this is not going away. Already in the last 6 weeks, actually, I've come up with other points that need raising to do not raising, but we need to be made aware of and need addressing. So I think this is, again, as what we said at the beginning, the gravitas of this of the Scrutiny Committee and the work that we did achieve with the Task and Finish Group for Housing Associations, we mustn't lose it. So therefore this is really important stuff. We need to be nimble, and I think that's what this does. It takes off some of the pressure from this group meeting, as it does once a month if we have this group. I think that's really important.
I'm glad you were looking at me and Councillor Keithley when you said nimble there, because I think that describes us to a T, doesn't it, Stuart? Yeah, do you want to come back in on that, please? Yeah, I've seen you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I feel quite nimble most of the time.
It must have been just
like
a compliment
yourself.
anyway. So.
It's a question, really, in respect of the performance of the housing associations, because I think the Task and Finish group was looking to get some metrics from them, although I think we were in a position where we might not be able to insist upon that. But I'm interested to know whether or not, in fact, we've started any, or gathering any data and started reporting it, because unless I've missed something during the holiday period, I don't think yet I've seen anything. So I wondered if I could ask that specific question, Howard.
We've had some data, haven't we?
So at the moment, in summary, the data we've got is the responses from the housing associations to that original questionnaire, and then we've started collecting, because we agreed as a task, the Task and Finish group agreed we'd start collecting it. We started pulling together our own data on reports, but we hesitate to go any further than that because it will fall under the remit of this working group to oversee that. So that's why we're keen to get this working group up and started, and then we can start engaging with housing associations and determine exactly what we want from them, yeah.
Councillor Rolfe, please.
I think part of the this agenda is that we establish the membership of the group and agree the terms of reference. I'm just going to go back to my original question at the very beginning of the meeting. And I know that Susan and Tony are going to discuss it, but I just feel we have to open it up. We have to open it up to other.
I think if we go
but,
to the,
but okay, let's just.
Should we do this bit now then? I think we've got a disagreement on this. I think if you want to propose that you open this terms of reference up to non-scrutiny committee members, you can do that, get a seconder, and we'll vote on it. And if that's this committee's proposal that they want to do, we can do that, and then you can go back to
propose that?
Go back to the leader and say, this is what the scrutiny committee has decided.
In which case, I will propose that, and I need a seconder.
And I'm happy to second.
Thank you. That we open it up to the council, the whole council, for membership.
With the proviso that they take training. Yeah.
Can I just say this, that if we go down this line, what happened before council when we set up this committee is that we did invite other council members could come to the meetings. What I suggest, just a suggestion, because if we delay this, dither and delay, etc., what I really want to do with this is I want to, perhaps we should have a set number of people from this committee on the Task and Finish group, and then we have an additional, I don't know, 3 spots from the wider council to come in, which is broadly speaking what happened before, I think. But if we, how is this going to delay the setting up of this Task and Finish group? Really, that's what I'm mithering about at the moment. If we go down this route, because what I actually wanted to do today, because I want to put my name forward clearly for this Task and Finish group, as I was the chair of it, is to let's get this up and running and get a date in the diary with, say, 3 or 4 members from this committee, and then we open it up to another 2-3 members from the council. But, you know, how long is waiting for that decision to be made? Will it then have to come back to OSC for us to decide? You know, we have to move.
May I just follow up there, because I don't remember anyone else on the council being invited to come onto the committee, to come and speak at the committee. And I believe
no, we're not on about
Susan
the committee,
Junet
we're on about the Task and
actually
Finish
said to me that she didn't get the chance to come to any of the Task and Finish meetings to speak. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'm just saying that...
But you'll remember that committee, and you could have asked that Task and Finish group, you could have asked if other members...
But with all due respect, I didn't know until after that they'd asked to come. So I'm just saying we have to be much more transparent and open if we go down the route that Councillor Wally Hawkins is suggesting, that we bring in people. But anyway, I've made a proposal, and it's been seconded.
Have we any counter?
Can I just be clear about what that proposal is to make sure that if it goes through we do the right thing? Are you proposing on substitutes for making a recommendation about substitutes for OSC or specifically about this task and finish group? So I've slightly lost where we lost the thread.
Right, this proposal in terms of the task and finish group is to, we establish here at ONS how many people we want on this task and finish group, okay? Whether it's 5, 7, 9, 15, 25, who knows? But we establish the number and we go out to the council and ask if anyone from the council would like to sit on it, and presumably there has to be a political balance involved. That's what I'm suggesting.
Councillor Keithley first. I'll bring you...
Sorry, and that furthermore, that, depending on the vote, it goes to the leader and Mr. Perks to discuss it.
Is that right? Should it not go to... should it not go to the Cabinet? As the...
Well, if it's just relating to the task and finish group, that's a subgroup of the OSC. So my understanding it's within your discretion as a committee to determine who you want on your own task and finish group, and you'll make that recommendation to full council as per this minute, and that will be endorsed there. So I think that bit's within your gift. If you wanted to change the arrangements for the OSC, that would be a more broader thing, but we're not talking about that now, so let's pick that up separately. So
I've got Councillor Keithley, Councillor Littlewood, and then I'll bring Councillor Junior in.
Thanks, Chair. I think cutting to the chase on this is about the task and finish group on the housing associations. And it's about having enough of a pool of people to come forward from OSC to make that happen. And I think the concern is maybe there's not enough people available because people haven't got the time and headroom to do it. I'm not sure how many people need to be on the task and finish group, whether there's a minimum number. I would suggest probably 3 or 4 would be sufficient. So my view is that if we can find 3 or 4 from this committee, that would probably suffice, provided that task and finish group did broadcast what it was doing and people were able to listen to what was going on and have some input, because the housing associations affect all members of this council.
Councillor Littlewood.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Keithley. I'm a bit confused about what this discussion is about, because one of the important things about the Housing Association Working Group and any other working group is that the councillors that sit on these working groups are familiar and up to date and fluent in what the work is that's being done. And a casual coming in and coming out just defeats that position. However, having said that, the situation as it is today is that the meetings of the working groups are published. It's not unreasonable for any other council member to attend those meetings on invitation and be asked to contribute, should they have a specific thing to say and to contribute to the discussions and the debates. So I don't see that we need to change anything. I think the facilities are already there and in place. But I mean, I'm not against it, but what I am against is a fluid and changing membership of the working groups, because that would be contra to good working practice and would slow down the process enormously. We'd end up backtracking, reprising, and generally increasing the workload and achieving very little.
So, just to sum up those points then, we want some... we'll come in and say, yeah, thank you. No, I'm chairing the meeting. It's my discretion whether I bring Councillor Junior in, when and if. So, I said I'll bring Councillor Junior in, so I will bring Councillor Junior. It's my discretion. I don't have to, but it's my discretion. So I think looking at this, we've talked about continuity. I think that's a key point. Councillor Keithley said about number 3 or 4 potentially, which I've not any disagreement with, no problem with. With the preference, if I'm, tell me if I'm saying this incorrectly, Stuart, with the preference that they're filled by members of Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the first, in the first wave of nominations. If they're not filled by overview and scrutiny committee members, we then put it out to all members of the council. Was that?
I think that's very reasonable, because the issue in my mind is have we got enough room or enough capacity within the members that have come to this and actually are very busy on other things as well to participate in task and finish group. If we've got enough capacity within here, that's fine. Where we haven't, we might need to seek to bring in some capacity from outside the OSC.
Yeah.
I think I would agree with what you said.
Councillor Rolfe, are you happy with that?
I would agree with that.
Councillor Junior, do you want to come in now, please?
I just thought it might be useful because I actually have chaired a task and finish group before. We did the climate change task and finish group. I think we finished from beginning to end in about 3 to 4 months, I think. What we did was we had a small group, but we brought in expertise from other councillors and they participated. Now, on the Housing Associations Working Group in particular, those councillors that have got considerable numbers of housing associations in their wards would have particular expertise, and it would be very useful to the working group to be able to hear from that expertise that they have. And they may not be on the scrutiny committee per se, so being able to bring them into a working group actually adds to the outcome of the working group, if that is helpful. You know, I'm sure it would be helpful to the group if they were able to bring that in. So depending on the working group, if there are councillors elsewhere that have got expertise, either in their professional lives or in their wards, then bringing them in actually adds to the outcome for the working group and the report that comes from it, in my opinion. I hope that's helpful.
I think we should give the chair of that working group discretion to bring those people in as and when required, which is sort of what we do now anyway, but we're formalising the process. So I think we've got a council. Rolf did the initial proposal with the amendment of.
I'm going to withdraw that proposal, but I do want it discussed by the leader and Tony Perks about, in future, any task and finish groups, if it's felt appropriate, could be opened up to the council rather than just members of the, because we are all incredibly busy. We can't have too many. So
yeah, no, I agree with that, and I agree with your sentiment, but it is not up to the leader or Mr. Perks to determine its future of the Constitution, but as we're standing at the moment, this committee makes that decision. So again, I've no real issue if we talk about this, but I think Mr. Perks has got some homework to do on this to see how we can progress this. But I think what we've got and what we do now is bring people in on a regular basis. We've got some suggestions from Councillor Keithy where we potentially have 4 on the committee. I've not heard anything different, so I'm happy with 4. With proposal, with the leeway that the chair of that scrutiny committee is able to bring in, I was going to say expert witness, people with experience in that area to add in and contribute. Councillor Rolfe, please. Oh, sorry, Dan.
I'd like to suggest 5. I know of 3 members of this committee who want to be part of this group, and that would seem to achieve political balance.
Yeah. So yeah, the recommendation is 5 at the moment. So we'll go with 5. Any proposals with 5?
Do you want quorum? Does that mean all 5 have to be there for the thing to?
No, a quorum of 3. I'm giving the leeway to the chair of that committee to bring in, like I say, bring in expert witnesses, people with experience. We've got something there. We're happy with that?
Yeah. So do we want to add in something to say that
do we want to add in something to say, in the terms of reference, that the membership will be open to OSC in the first instance, and then any spots that remain vacant will then be opened up to other councillors?
Yeah.
I think everyone's agreed on that. Okay.
Brilliant. And again, just on the point, again, Tony, from the point of view, we talked about political balance, which when you start getting down to smaller numbers, percentages can be quite tricky. If we've got 5 spots for OSC on committee, and for example, the Lib Dems are only able to put forward 2 members, which I very much doubt it, and the Conservatives have put 3 members forward, that would be against the political balance. So therefore, we're in a dilemma. Does that mean then we appoint somebody who's not on the OSC, even though we've got 5 members of OSC who want to be on the committee? Go on, Sarah.
I don't recall political balance being the key matter for this task and finish group when it was first established. I don't recall it being a priority. What I recall being a priority was that housing associations were held to account. So what this task and finish group needs is not a political balance. What it actually needs is people with the gravitas and ability to stand on this committee and hold housing associations to account, and that to me would be more of a priority. You know, it is a collegiate approach to this. I don't think that political point scoring is a priority here, and therefore the priority should be getting 4, 5 decent calibre councillors to sit on this task and finish group. Thank you.
It may be helpful. As I'm seeing the Task and Finish group, it's a group that reports and does the business of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. You've got your political balance secured at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is giving the brief to the Task and Finish group. So you may take the view that, bearing in mind it's actually under instruction of a politically balanced organisation, that this issue is less important, but it's within your gift to decide differently.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I was going to say exactly the same. I think as it's a working group of this committee, the political balance is on this committee, and the working group is less important because this committee can direct what it does.
Yeah, precisely. If it comes up with something that the rest of the committee doesn't like, the political balance can then potentially... Malcolm, please.
Yes, thank you. It's a comment, really, with regard to political balance. I've sat on 2 working groups, and in my experience, and albeit somewhat limited of just over a year, I think that the cross-party work has been exceptionally unpolitically biased in any way. I think people who sit on the working groups do a very, very good job, and the politics doesn't actually come into it. It's just completing the task that's been handed down by OSC.
I totally agree, and I think, as chair, I think we should win it, because I think that's never come across as any other conversations. Peter, can I answer everything? Sorry, Peter.
Have we got the people that's going to be on this Task and Finish group for the number of 5? Do we know who the 5 are?
I think because we've got a few members who are not here today, I think we should send around and ask them, because it's not fair for us to say, well, you're not here, you can't go on it. I don't think that's fair. So I think I'll task the officers to send something around either early next week, because I don't think it's fair this afternoon, to ask for people to put the name forward.
Sorry, but we know in our group who wants to be on it. And
well, sorry, I wasn't privy to that.
we do know in our group who wants to be on it.
I know you said that, but you didn't say which 3. You didn't necessarily say I'll have a member of the scrutiny, because we were on about extending it to outside the committee, weren't we? So you might have had 3 names, and they might have been 3 names from the general population rather than members of this committee.
Let's name some names and see where we get to.
Well, I suppose all the ones who are not here are from your group, aren't they? All right, if you want to put forward your names.
I happen to know that Councillor Alcock is interested in being on this group.
Yeah. And the other 2?
As as I have lots of Orbit customers in my ward, and I've had lots of experience with Orbit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And have we got any other nominations who want to be on there? Is that okay? We happy with those 5 nominations? Yeah. And, yeah, okay, we've got the five nominations then. And we'll look forward to the report that the chairman will scrutinise. Right then, next item on the agenda is the Cabinet meeting of the 2nd of September. And we're looking at 2 items, the resettlement and asylum update and performance monitoring report of Q1. 2 officers here, Simon and Nick. We haven't got Anton Depp, but we've got Simon and Nick here to... I think you could do a really good substitute for them as well, couldn't you, gentlemen? The bearded version. I think I would take it that people have read the report, and if they haven't, they should have done. So in time, because we've spent a lot of time here, we'll start with the performance monitoring report update for Q1. So if I've got some questions, if members have some questions or points to make, and again, if we can keep them brief and concise and to the point, that would be very helpful. So whilst we are waiting, just a couple of general points is that action due for later seems to be an ongoing point. So, yeah, I think perhaps whether we could categorise them into ongoing or due for later, that's fine. I don't think I've 2 issues, and some are in several places as well under different CP2s and whatever. My one major, well, there's a couple of points here, if I can read my own writing. There's a bit about training, particularly about training on carbon literacy. Page 7, it's CP2E, become like, so I think there's about the timescale of that and who we're prioritising first regarding that, so that would be quite interesting to see how that goes, or whether that's something that could go back to the climate change panel. There was one point where the customer access terminals, I just wondered how they're now going. Is that any progress on that one?
I can answer that now if you like. The southern terminal is installed. There is some issue with connectivity to the County Council Wi-Fi that was being worked on last week. I'm assuming that it's been solved by now, but it was there, and that was the pilot one that was, the hardware certainly in place, and it was in the final knockings of being brought live about a week ago.
Brilliant. And we've got some of our targets, and I think it was, I can't find it now. It was always the way when you're looking for something that you can never find it, and then 2 seconds later you find it. Where we are missing some of the targets, and I think it was to do with housing, but I'll come back on that one. So I've rambled on. Has anybody got any questions on this? Councillor Keithley, please.
Well, this is a question on the update on the council action plan. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly where you were.
Yeah, the performance monitoring. Yeah.
Okay. I'm on page 30. If you could turn to that. So this is an update on the targets in respect of CP3D, facilitate more opportunities for residents to use alternative modes of transport. Okay, I'll sort of declare my interest. Ward member of Long Marston Ward, with all the new houses at Meon Vale and Long Marston Airfield Garden Village, which is going to provide a significant proportion of the homes that will be asked to deliver probably within the updated plan. So you'll read on here that we're still waiting on a feasibility study in relation to a Stratford to Honeybourne rail link. Haven't heard anything about that. I do know that business case for reopening the link from Long Marston to Honeybourne, so that you don't have to get in your car to go to Honeybourne, so if you want to go to Paddington. I do know personally that there are some issues in respect of land ownerships, because Bird's industrial site actually covers over the top end of that old railway. So that's going to be a significant barrier. But in addition, so we haven't had that report yet, and in addition, I know that we're still waiting for some transport studies that were undertaken by Vectos and Jacobs. That was in respect of sustainable alternative transport solutions to potentially a southwest relief road. And I was assured back in December that these reports were imminently due to be circulated, and we're now in, well, on Sunday is the 1st of September. So, you know, all these assurances about where these reports are, and this particular feasibility study with consultants, that alarms me a little bit, knowing the constraints on that route. It alarms me that we're spending a lot of money on that. I'd like to know where we are, and I'd like that put to Cabinet, if possible, because it's a key issue in respect of housing and infrastructure and the provision of sustainable alternative transport in Long Marston Ward, as my colleague across knows only too well, because he's spent a little bit of time with me in my ward to look at exactly these problems, Dave.
Be very interested, yeah.
Could come back on that one.
Yeah, we have had a meeting with the, I'm just looking at my notes of it here. There was a meeting with the leaders of the County Council and our leader on the 6th of August. The Vectos and the Jacobs report are now in a position where they're being published, and there's a joint sort of comms piece being put together to sort of get those out in the public domain, so that should be imminent. I'm slightly surprised it doesn't happen by now, but I will chase that. At the time of the meeting, the rail study wasn't yet complete, so there seems to have been a delay on that, delay on the train to keep Mr. Crump and his jokes going. But I'll chase where we are with that as well. Councillor Keithley.
Thank you very much, Tony. That's good to hear about the Jacobs and Vectos reports. They are long overdue, so we look forward to reading those and see what they say. It's not really a surprise that the trains are running late, is it?
I'm just going to vacate the chair. I've asked Councillor Passingham to take over, just feeling a little bit woozy. So I will just take Councillor Passingham to take over the meeting, if that's okay. Just feel a little bit, yeah, so apologies, and I'll pass. No, not too bad, just feel. So I'll let Councillor
While Councillor Passingham gets himself in the seat, was there anything else on the performance report that people wanted to sort of pick up? So just in terms of reference to Cabinet, then if we mention something around the concerns about the Vectos report at Long Marston, Councillor Keithley, would that be useful feedback?
Thank you, Tony. Yes, it would.
I'm presuming when the chair raised the comment of action due later, that means in the timetable, it's timetabled for later. It's as simple as that, is it?
Yeah, the way that we deal with that, the difference between the ongoing and the action due later is ongoing are things that we're sort of currently working on. Action due later is things that are scheduled to be sort of reported back later in the year. So there is a subtle difference between the two, although that might not be immediately obvious.
So the other point
is the other report.
Yes, so, but Councillor Whaley-Huggins. So.
Sorry, it's not about trains. I don't know where we're at with the meeting. Sorry, I had to step out there. But I did have a query on page 39. The key performance indicators. Are we still there? Is that all right or not? Just say. Yeah. I'm just concerned, but I think I may be interpreting the data wrong. Can you explain the percentage of council tax collected? Because at the moment, it's looking as if we're off target by some considerable amount. But is this the 98.2% is for the four quarters, and this is just 1 quarter that's being reported?
Yeah,
here.
it is slightly off target. The figure that we're comparing to is the 34.84 figure, is what we expected to collect in Q1. We are doing some work that's got picked up when it came to management team. We think a lot of this is because people now pay their council tax over 12 months rather than traditional 10, and we're not sure we've got the profiling quite right, so we've asked for some work to be done on that to sort of clarify the detail of that figure. But yes, the 34.84 figure is the relevant one.
Any more points on performance monitoring? No? Oh, Simon. Yeah, sorry, Simon.
That's great. So we now need to do the other report.
Resettlement of asylum seekers update. Over to Simon.
We can either go.
So, Nick, would you like to give the introduction then? As Mr. Perks has suggested. Yeah, right, Nick.
Right, I think I've got it. Thanks, Howard. No need to assist. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'll keep this as brief as possible. As you know, or as you probably know, the council's partially involved in a county-wide and national effort to resettle a number of different groups that migrate to this country from abroad, essentially under a number of different schemes. There are 4 schemes that the council are kind of actively involved in. The first is the UK resettlement scheme, which was previously known as the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme. The second is a combination of schemes, ARAP and ACRS, and the SFA scheme, Services Families Accommodation, which are all subsets of our efforts to accommodate fleeing Afghan nationals that have assisted the country during our occupation of Afghanistan. Homes for Ukraine, which you'll all be familiar with, I'm sure, and the National Asylum Dispersal Scheme, which is accommodation for a period of time when people arrive here from abroad seeking asylum and pending the outcome of that application. So those sort of, I've listed them in the report as 5 schemes, but there's kind of four really. Number of other schemes do exist. We kind of get involved in them on an ad hoc basis. The community sponsorship scheme is one, and a couple of arrivals have arrived under that scheme, and we are aware that a number of British nationals previously lived in Hong Kong have also resettled in the district, but the numbers around that are fewer than the other schemes, and they're a sort of different subset anyway, because they're entitled by virtue of their British nationality to resettle here anyway. So, as I say in the report, asylum continues to be very topical, and we continue to receive arrivals in the district under all of the schemes. The second part of the report goes on to discuss the pledges that we made as an authority some years ago. And as you can see from the table, we made pledges around the UK resettlement scheme and ARAP and ACRS and Families Accommodation Scheme, which are those Afghan schemes. And currently we're running below target against our pledges. There's some mitigations around that. The UK resettlement scheme was paused for a period to focus on the Afghan schemes because of the kind of evacuation of service personnel from Afghanistan. And what we have, the position we found ourselves in is a position of needing to seek an alternative way of delivering the accommodation for this collection of schemes. First of all, I'll kind of discount the asylum scheme. The asylum scheme is run by the Home Office. It's delivered by Serco. You will be aware that they use accommodation within the district to fulfil that. We have no control over that. The two schemes that we do have control over, the UK resettlement scheme and the collection of Afghan provisions. The UK resettlement scheme, as I say, was paused. The Afghan scheme is well underway. Our election to use private rented sector accommodation to accommodate people arriving on both of those kind of schemes proved a wise decision at the time, I think. But with the changes in the dynamics of the private rented sector, so it's more expensive than it used to be. A lot of private landlords are choosing to sell up and leave that kind of sector. It has become increasingly difficult to secure accommodation in privately rented accommodation for people under the UK and the Afghan schemes, UK resettlement scheme and Afghan scheme. So one of the corrective measures that we're proposing, or the primary corrective measure that we're proposing, is to further our engagement with housing associations to identify appropriate housing association accommodation, so social rented accommodation, for use as accommodation for arrivals under those two schemes. You may be familiar with the fact that the decision was made some years ago to focus on the private rented sector for this. As I say, that proved fruitful at the time, but subsequently it's become harder to achieve using the private rented sector. And if we're going to achieve our pledges, which I do believe we can, then we need to seek additional supply of accommodation, which we can secure through the social rented sector. There are some consequences to that. We're 19 units short, and if we're to secure all 19 of those units over the next 12 months from the social rented sector, that means that 2% of our allocations that would otherwise have gone to local community members who've been on the housing register for a period of time, those allocations to those people will not take place. So there'll be some kind of displacement, if you like, of people who were on the housing register who otherwise would have had an offer from Home Choice Plus. They may have to wait longer, or they may not get an offer at all. But as I say, that represents only around 2% of all allocations. So there are a number of decisions, saw in the report. The first is a noting, the second is to consider the choice around empowering the team to seek accommodation within social rented accommodation as well as private rented accommodation. And the third is to give delegated authority to the head of service to allocate the asylum dispersal grant, which we receive to support our work on the, specifically specifically in respect of those arrivals seeking asylum. So that's not the Arab scheme, that's not the ACRS scheme, that's not the UK resettlement scheme. Happy to take any questions.
Before we carry on, it's nearly 1 o'clock. Are the members of this committee happy to carry on for another 15 minutes, maybe? Or yes. Yeah, just about. Right. Okay. I've got 3 questions. First from Councillor Johnson.
Can I understand what the word pledge means, what consequences do we have if we don't deliver on the pledge? You know, something was made 4 years ago. You know.
I think the consequences are primarily reputational. We've pledged this to the county, we've pledged it to the other authorities within the county, and that's been fed up the chain to the Home Office, and plans have been made based around the pledges that the individual authorities made.
Okay, Councillor Whaley-Hoggins.
Yeah, I think this is a really serious matter, and I think I'm proposing, don't do that very often, I'm proposing that this is a full call in to Overview and Scrutiny Committee for our next meeting, please, so that we can discuss this in more detail and properly, because I think there's a lot to unpick here, rather than a 10-minute chat around this table, really. I think that I'd like to understand how we've got to this position. I think the fact that how we prevent it. I think this is, because this is so serious and dealing with some very vulnerable people, those that seek housing and those from all quarters, really. I think that this is worthy of being called in fully to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, please. Thank you.
Okay. So we've got a proposal. Have we got a seconder to that?
I kind of feel in a similar way. However, if that is the case, this needs to be decided at Cabinet on Monday. And therefore, is there any, well, I mean, this is the Cabinet papers, so therefore, is there any point in us, I mean, I'd quite like to discuss it at ONS in more detail, but if this is going to be agreed on at Cabinet, unless Cabinet decide to bat it back to ONS, I've no idea.
Yeah, would it be helpful to, I was just trying to look at the Constitution, but I'll talk straight off the top of my head, but I think I've got it covered. You have the right, as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to call in a decision of Cabinet, but there are certain criteria you have to meet. There have to be a certain number and it has to be on certain grounds, and that's put forward to the monitoring officer for a decision. I'm not sure that you can do that in advance of the decision, because you'd have to sort of disagree with the decision that the Cabinet made. Now, what you could do is you could suggest that the Chairman of the OSC said, you think this is such a serious decision that you would like it to be referred back to you for consideration, you'd be happy to input on that. But I don't think you can ask for a delay to meet. You'd either have to debate it now, or you could put forward that recommendation.
I'm not asking for a delay in the decision, but I think what I would like is for this to come to back to OSC after Monday's meeting for a full discussion and unpicking, really.
More as a sort of like a learning exercise?
No, not a learning exercise, no, but I think the public, our residents, need to be assured that we've looked at all angles of this and asked the questions, really. It's not a learning exercise, it's what you said, it's that calling it in for scrutiny, really, to look at, you know, the decisions that are being made, or I withdraw my proposal, and then after the decision that's made on Monday, we then call it in. But it will delay, and I think that our residents actually will want some answers to some questions.
Councillor Keithley, did you want to say something on that?
Yes, Chair, I would. But first of all, I've got a question for Nick. Thanks, Nick, for your explanation. I mean, my question will lead into my observations and my comments about the next steps. So the question really, Nick, for you was that you mentioned that whilst there was some impact on the social rented capacity that we had for our own residents, you said it was quite low, and you mentioned 2% of allocation. My question to you now is, how many of our residents are currently on the list waiting for allocations under Home Choice Plus?
because I think many people watching this would see that potentially, although we've made a pledge to the other authorities, that this authority's priority would be first to its residents. And that's what I think people would, looking in, would probably think. So the first part of this for me is, well, how many people have we got on the list at the moment? And then I've got something to follow up with.
Okay, so the housing register is not static, so it will change from time to time as people join and as people are housed, but there will be around 5,000 households waiting. The majority will be residents of the district. A handful, you know, a subset of that won't be residents of the district.
Okay, so that sounds to me like quite a significant number, Nick, if I might say. Did you say 5,000? That sounds like a big number, actually. So if I'd been on the list for, I don't know, 12 months or 2 years and I've got a young family, I'll be looking to see if I can find some accommodation. So I think what I would suggest is that there was a representation from OSC to Cabinet, that this committee consider that this is quite an important issue in respect of the allocation of housing to residents, you know, and our commitment to housing our residents, and that we have got to understand just what we're getting into in respect of the allocation of social rented properties under these schemes that might impact significantly on the waiting time that our residents have to find their own accommodation. So I would suggest that goes to Cabinet on Monday, and we'll await that decision from Cabinet.
You're happy with that, Councillor Whaley-Huggins?
So, sorry, just to put this up, so Councillor Keithley or committee generally, if we were to sort of feed back to Cabinet that they should have due regard to the effect that this has on the waiting list, and the OSC have concerns about the effect on sort of the Stratford resident population, if they have that in their mind when they're making the decision, then if you disagree with the decision at the end, you've got the call-in procedures, but they would have to, I've just looked them up, sorry, I'm not talking to the microphone, I get told off on that. It relates to executive key decisions. It's certainly an executive decision, whether it's a key decision, whether it's on the forward plan, we can check that. And you would have to sort of demonstrate that the decision that the Cabinet reached wasn't made in accordance with the principles set out in Article 13 of the Constitution. So it's not a sort of open and shut case. You'd have to look at the merits of how the decision, how the debate was sort of taken at Cabinet. But if the Cabinet had that in their minds, then that would give them more chance of making a sound decision, I think. So I'm happy to take that forward through the Chairman to Cabinet on Monday.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I think that although we've had a very thorough presentation from Nick, it's the first time we've really had the opportunity to understand the significance of this. And you know, I think that members of this committee probably have some concerns.
Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps, therefore, it's clear that this isn't going to be called in per se, but perhaps, therefore, as a matter of urgency, social housing numbers and waiting lists, you know, subtitle it as you wish, needs to be moved fairly rapidly up for us to have a look at onto our agenda, because it doesn't actually come under the remit of housing associations. That's quite different, but this is really important, and I think therefore that would be my compromise, that the number that you've just given us, there are 5,000 people on the waiting list for housing in Stratford, it's higher than I expected, and I would probably think that's probably higher than most of the people sitting in this room is concerned. And also, of what is concerning is the type of housing that is being sought for those 19, was it, Nick? I think the type of housing that the 19 require, it's all glibly to say that that's just 2% of what is of the housing list. However, I don't think I'm wrong in this, the size of housing and the type of housing that those 19, if you like, applicants need are perhaps some of the, you know, the rarer properties to come online or to come available that are needed. So your 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom family homes. Thank you.
Could I just quickly follow up, Tony? Nick, you mentioned that number, but I'm going to ask you a question about how the prioritisation, because not everybody's in the same band, are they? So it's likely that there are some much lower priority. So it's about understanding the prioritisation of housing for these people, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's about 6 or 7 different bandings, and it's like a pyramid. The people with the lower levels of need are at the bottom. I think, you know, don't quote me on these figures, but that would make up probably 80% of the housing register. A further 15% is in the high but not priority bandings, and then probably 5% is in the very highest banding.
So thank you for that, Nick. So it is important to understand that just taking a single figure for those waiting on the housing list is probably sort of misrepresenting in our minds just the scale of the problem. So perhaps a better understanding of that would help this committee.
If I can just come back on that, the 2% figure was a 2% of allocations, as opposed to 2% of the list. So if you assume the allocations go to people who are in the highest need, which they should do the way the system's crafted, it doesn't represent 2% of all those waiting, it represents 2% of those people getting accommodated.
That's fine, and that detail then needs to come out in discussion in the Cabinet. I suggest that this committee make that request.
Right.
So will those people get priority though? Even though they go on the list, they will get priority over? So if it was one person against one of our residents for a 1-bedroom flat, they would get priority.
The way we've considered it is that a number of properties would be taken out of the pool to be allocated, which we can do. The policy enables us to do that, and then allocated to those 19. You know, we're using the figure 19. If we find 10 private rented properties, it would only be 9. You know, but it would be a maximum of 19.
Okay. In which case, what happens if we don't meet that pledge? What are the consequences of not meeting that pledge?
As I said before, reputational damage, but I don't think we would be in a sticky legal position or anything like that. I'd need to go away and have a little look at it, but we're not contractually committed to deliver those units.
Right, Councillor Littlewood, we've only got 2.5 minutes left, and we might have to extend it again.
Thank you. Right, so we've got a series of different numbers here, and I want to get this in context and what the numbers are relevant to the discussion. So you have a waiting list of 5,000 families. Households, yes, households. Fine, but the 2% of 19 families or households represented the 2% means that on an annual allocation basis, you've got 950 allocations per annum is expected. Well, 2%.
Whatever 2% of, yeah.
If 19 is 2%,
equation
then it
is
must
right.
be 950 on that basis. Okay, so the number that we need to consider is, it seems to me, for this purpose is the 950,000 allocations and what the effect of the 19 will make on that, which actually shrinks down to be a less significant amount and less significant argument. What concerns me and has come out of this and was a surprise to me is we have another 4,000 households looking for accommodation, and I think that is something that this committee should be asking questions about. Thank you.
Right. It's nearly past. We wanted to look at it in more detail. I think there's a lot of questions coming up here that we need to discuss in a lot of depth. So does the committee want to put it on the agenda for next time? Is that possible, Howard, to put it on the agenda for next time?
Could I just ask Mr. Cadd one question, which may influence whether the priority we give to this? Has the number of 5,000 on the list changed radically in recent times, or how long? What's the longer-term picture?
Well, the list rises until you have, you write to everybody and you invite them the opportunity to re-register if they haven't resolved their own problems. Then it comes down a bit, and then it grows up, grows again, and then you invite people to re-register if they're still interested, and then it comes down. So it sort of goes up, and then it comes down a bit, and then it goes. The relationship between allocations and the number of people on the housing register depends primarily, because the primary, well, two variants, number of people who join the register, but also the number of houses that we enable as an authority, because every house that we enable as an authority takes a household off that list. So we have done very well with our enabling program over the last decade, and have enabled lots of new housing association properties, which has maintained a steady register figure. So that more than answers your question, I think, Tony.
So yeah, the point I was just trying to see, because is it much worse than it's been in recent years? And you're saying no, it's a steady state.
It's a largely steady state because we have enabled lots of properties over the last 10 years. Had we not, it would have been a very different picture, and we would have a significantly increasing register.
Right. So should we carry on till 1:30? No. Right. So
we'll take that away and see if we can fit it into the work programme.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We're going to try. Yeah.
Just wants to say
yeah.
Sorry, so I'm clear on what I'm doing for Cabinet. I would propose that I put some figures together around the kind of conversations we've had now, so that can be tabled at Cabinet, so they can make a decision based on a sort of slightly more informed picture. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone. And so, can I use this gavel?